The series is tied 2-2. I am heading back to Cleveland. I'm from the past here in Orlando. We're going back to Cleveland. We're going to talk with Chris Manning of Locked On Cavs. You see the green background. If you're watching on YouTube, you know what that means. It's crossover time as we break down Magic Cavs today on Locked On Magic.
You are Locked On Magic, your daily Orlando Magic podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And you are indeed Locked On Magic. Today is recording on April 29th, 2024. It will be April 30th, 2024. Happy Game 5 from all of us to you. My name is Philip Rossman-Reich. I'm the expert insight editor over at OrlandoMagicDaily.com. You can follow me on Twitter at PhilipRR_OMD. On today's episode of Locked On Magic, we're going to break down the first 4 games of this series between the Magic and the Cavs with our friend Chris Manning of Locked On Cavs. We'll get the Magic perspective of things, the Cavs perspective of things, and who has the momentum, who has the advantage heading into the best of 3 part of this series. Yes, it's best of 3, just first to 2 wins. It's really that simple. We're going to get to all that coming up here right now. Let's get right to it.
Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That is $150 win or lose. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. I'm Chris Manning. That is Philip Rossman-Reich. It's a Locked On Mavs, Locked On Cavs, Cavs for Mavs, Locked On Magic crossover here. Tied at 2-2, Philip. Coming back to Cleveland. And we have to, I think, start with Orlando because the last 2 games have been about the Magic. They've been about what Orlando has done on the court. It has been about their mentality, their physicality, their preparation. So to you, what have they done to really take the series, in my mind, take all the momentum, take the energy back in the series and put it in their favor?
Yeah, I mean, I think when you look at the playoffs, I think that so much of it is about you have to do what you do but better. And that's something that the Magic talked about, but maybe didn't quite understand as a team that really had no playoff experience before game 1 of this series. And so I think when the Magic got home, they stopped overthinking things. I think putting Wendell Carter back into the starting lineup was the right move and probably what they should have done from game 1, because it felt like Jamal Mosley just tried to pre-adjust to something. Like he was not trying to be too cute. I think
he overthought it. He overthought it. And
Yeah, and so you bring back like some level of comfort, playing groups that have played together for a good chunk of the year, that had been successful, and just the matchups just all started to align. And then obviously you get home, you feel a little bit more comfortable, you feel a little bit more confident. The Magic said after games 1 and 2 that they really just felt like they were getting the right shots. They just weren't making them. You're going to make shots when you're home. That's just kind of the deal, I think, with this thing. And so, yes, Orlando made shots that started to loosen up the Cavs defense. They, I think, found some pockets where they could get downhill and score. I think they were more willing to take some mid-range jumpers, and they hit them. Making shots is important. But I think Orlando just kind of found that groove that they were missing in Cleveland. And again, I think the lineup change was a big part of it. I think tightening rotations and kind of Jamal Mosley taking the playoffs a little bit more seriously or treating them a little bit more differently helped this team kind of find themselves again at home.
Orlando, to me, has shown me everything I would have wanted if I was them coming out of the 2 games in Cleveland. If you had said, okay, they're going to adjust the starting lineup, they are going to put Wendell Carter back in it, they are going to not be, frankly, like overwhelmed, right? Like they're not going to be in a situation where they go down 2-0 to a team that, like, hasn't accomplished anything, but has guys that are a little bit older. Like, this is the first time through for Franz, for Paolo. Like, they've showed us something. And Franz, to me, is the guy that I think exemplifies this best, Philip, because he had, as you know, and I think covered really well on your show, like, he didn't have the exact season you might have expected. He didn't have, like, the breakthrough performance. He had some injury issues, didn't shoot well from 3. And here's that guy in Game 4, the best scorer on the floor for Orlando in that game. And the moment of the game to me in a lot of ways, and tells you a lot about like what this Magic team is doing right now, is him crossing over George Niang, pointing at him and getting a tech because he's like, I own you. You are mine. Like, I got you. like him coming back and doing that and playing that way and just like showing that toughness on top of the adjustments they've made it tells me everything about the series. It is about that, and it is about the way they're playing, and it's those two things in concert that I think speak so well about what Orlando's doing right now.
Yeah, and I mean, I think, there's talk after game 3, and I think there was even some talk in the early games that things were getting chippy pretty quickly. Like, even game 1, like Mo Wagner was getting into some guys. I was shocked in game 1 that it took only like 3 minutes for Mo Wagner to be like persona non grata and public enemy number 1 in Cleveland. Like everyone understood like this is the guy that we have to hate for the next 2 weeks, and that was, I think, before they even remembered that he played at Michigan. And they put
exactly what I was going to say. The fact they didn't have to like put a photo, like the Cavs are very kitschy about some of the,
and they did that in game 2.
Okay, but the fact that like they didn't like the moment he checked in, they didn't just like put a photo of him in a Michigan jersey, and like, did he play for Beeline?
Yes, he did.
Should have just put a photo of him with Beeline and just like really really just heal it. Like, let's go full. Let's maybe. Like, too far,
Mo is wore. I don't know what shoes Mo wears because shoes just aren't my like thing. He's been wearing a Michigan colorway of his shoes since January when they won the national championship. He is. He's not trolling. That's what he's done all year. But he is happy to troll everyone. But like to that point, like Jamal Mosley has said throughout the whole course of the season, like we want to play with joy. Like Orlando doesn't want to bottle up this emotion or this bravado or whatever you want to call it. This is part of who they are, and so obviously you can't show it. You don't play with a lot of joy when you're getting worked like Orlando was in games 1 and game 2. But they kind of found that identity again back at home. And obviously it's easier to do that when the crowd is there's games 3 and 4 were the loudest I've ever heard Kia Center for a Magic game. Obviously the Magic haven't had the greatest history since they moved into that building in 2010, but that was as loud as I've heard that building for a Magic game or for any event in that building, in a while. And so like, obviously it's easier to kind of find that momentum when you're at home. And I think, both teams would say like, hey, we've taken care of our business at home. We've all done what we're supposed to do. Orlando still has to win in Cleveland to win this series. And so, finding that and showing that they're not going to back down, I think has been a big statement from this Magic team.
Tactically, the Carter part of it, I think, was obviously vital. Even making Isaac's role coming in, him going back to being the impact guy off the bench, where like he can come in and like change the energy instead of being like a tone setter. There is, I think, a difference there between him. Mm-hmm. But how have you, Philip, seen when you've looked at how Cleveland has had to react to Orlando? What has stood out to you about is it just simply like they're making more shots? Is there something about the way the Cavs are now defending what Orlando's doing now that Wendell's in the lineup that has stood out to you over these last 2 games? Yeah,
I mean, I think having Wendell Carter, who is a little bit more of a traditional center, enables them to kind of mix up a little bit of how they use him. Like when Wendell Carter will shoot threes, but I think again, this is where I think, Jamal Mosley kind of pre-adjusted. The idea, I think, was let's just have Jonathan Isaac in the corner. He's been a reliable 3-point shooter for us. I think he shot 37% from 3 during the season. We'll just put him in the corner, and Jared Allen's going to have to respect him. And so obviously when Isaac started missing a bunch of threes in that starting group, now that whole strategy goes out the window. When Wendell Carter, I think one thing that he's done really well is, yes, he can stretch out to the 3-point line and he'll sneak out to the corner, but he's going to sit in the dunker spot. He's going to sit kind of behind the defense. So if Paolo Banchero or Franz Wagner gets into the paint and forces Jared Allen to step up, instead of kicking out to the corner, which, is an open shot and was the right read the entire time in game 1 and 2, he can dump that pass down to Carter at the dunker spot or, floating back out the 3-point line. And that's maybe a higher percentage shot. So I think kind of like being able to diversify the attack a little bit more has been a big factor in games 3 and 4, because I felt like in games 1 and 2, I would tell my listeners, like, if it feels like the Magic are banging their head against the wall, trying to get through the wall and the paint that the Cavs had set up, it's because they are. They don't have any other way to attack. Like, Paolo's the only guy that can work off the dribble. They clearly need another guard to do that. The other thing, though, is I think Orlando got a little bit smarter and diversified here, too. They're playing Paolo more as a screener. He's still maybe bringing the ball up. He's still maybe initiating some actions, but he's not doing it nearly as much or like essentially every play like he was in games 1 and 2. They're trying to get the ball to Paolo in spots where he can read and react to the defense rather than having to dribble and find a way with his dribble gone, essentially.
The other, I think that where this has showed up in terms of, you hit on this earlier, so I want to just circle back to hit on, because there's the numbers and these, this is nuts. The mid-range shots for Orlando have changed the series. Game 3, 73% on all mid-range shots, including 87.5% on long mid-range shots and 63.6% on short mid-range. Those are all obscene numbers, obviously. You go to Game 4. Cooled down a little bit, but still really good, and it felt like they're both making tough shots and getting good looks in that space. Like they are finding there's room to attack Cleveland there, because Cleveland has this weird thing where there's size at the rim, which 3 out of the 4 games Orlando has had trouble at the rim, and then Orlando's not a good 3-point shooting team, so like they've, I think, correctly decided middle of the floor is a soft spot for us. Game 3, 56.5% from mid-range, 57.1 on long mid-range, and I think most importantly, 56.2% on short mid-range, which is 4 to 14 feet. So in free throw line to right outside the restricted area for people that are wondering what that is. That's the game plan, and Cleveland has not. I mean, I think the trouble for Cleveland defensively now, Philip, is going to be if they adjust to defend that, and they say our bigs are going to step up 2 feet and try to. Jared Allen's going to contest at the restricted area, or Evan Mobley needs to come out 2 steps further. You're opening up back cuts. You're opening up room to the rim. You're giving the Magic like kind of what they want, which is you then badger the rim. Like that little tactical thing is really where the series has ended up.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. Like this whole series has essentially been a battle of Jared Allen taking a half step. Like the whole. I mean, the Magic, their goal is still to get to the basket. Like that is still the ultimate goal. And the way that they initially conceived of doing that was we're going to have a shooter, we're going to go 5 out, have a shooter in the corner, and we're going to force Jared Allen to respect Jonathan Isaac as a shooter so that he's a half step late getting back to the paint. That's what the playoffs are. It's all about creating these steps and half steps. So where, you have to worry about this guy and leave that little gap open. And, I'm not big analytics guy, but I like numbers too. In the playoffs, all those numbers and all that efficiency stuff that you talk about in the regular season, you kind of throw that out the window. The playoffs are for mid-range jumpers. Like everyone who says the mid-range game is dead, the playoffs are for mid-range jumpers because again, that's what you're usually willing to give up. And if you're, banging your head against the wall, trying to force your way to the basket, you're going to commit turnovers. You're going to get eaten up by Cleveland's size. The Magic being able to stop and hit a short jumper forces you to step up, so it gives up that baseline cut. And it's also just a good shot. I would go back. I know Paolo didn't have the greatest game in Game 4. His first make in Game 4, he got around to pick and roll. Evan Mobley was going under it and was a little bit late. Paolo had an open lane to the basket, but if he takes that lane, Mobley is going to cut him off and catch him. He stops at the elbow and hits that jumper. Like that's a good shot, and that's again the difference in the series is Orlando decelerated a little bit and was like, we're not just going to recklessly attack the rim and attack their bigs anymore. At least especially when both are in, when both Mobley and Allen are in, they're not just going to drive straight into the teeth of that thing anymore.
Yeah. Cavs are in a weird spot. All right. After this, what does Game 4 tell us about what the series is, where it's going? We're going to talk about that up next. Hey, today's episode is brought to you by DoorDash. You want to make mom smile? Start Mother's Day with flowers or surprise her with gifts from the brand she loves, delivered the very same day with DoorDash. Pair flowers with a gift card so she can celebrate any way she wants. Is she a bookworm? Try a bookstore gift card. Does she love a good latte? Who doesn't? Get a gift card to her favorite coffee shop. You can't go wrong. Shop with savings that would make her proud. With a DashPass membership, you'll save with a $0 delivery fee and reduced service fees on eligible orders from DashPass merchants that meet the minimum subtotal. Other fees, including service fee, apply. Terms apply. Get all of your Mother's Day gifts all in one place and get 50% off your next order, up to $15 when you spend $15 plus on your next flower, convenience, grocery or retail order with code LOCKEDINNBA. That is LOCKEDINNBA. Order using DoorDash today. Terms apply. Again, that is code LOCKEDINNBA to get 50% off your next order up to $15 when you spend $15 or more. So segment 3 is going to be us asking the question, who is now should be favored to win this series? But I hear. Tell me what you think of this take coming off of Game 4. What we've seen, particularly those last 2 games in Orlando. The Cavs, to me, have told on themselves. They've told us what they are. They've told us what they are about. They've told us how they're going to handle pressure, all of that stuff. For me, I look at those games and I think Orlando is very much in this. At the very, very least, Orlando is now in this. This is now a series. The Cavs, after being up 2-0, should not be considered favorites by any wide margin, if they should be favorites at all. And I think Orlando, like, in some ways, is showing they might be a little more, like, equipped for the playoffs than the Cavs, which is a very alarming thing, I think, for the Cavs.
Obviously, it has been a long time since the Magic have been in a playoff series that they could win. It's 2011 was the last playoff series I think the Magic could feel like they could win. No offense to our 2019 guys and 2020 bubble boys. They were not beating the Raptors. They were not beating the Bucks.
You're telling me was it 28? Was it the 2019-2020 Magic team were the 8th in the conference? Let me name some dudes on that team.
Name some dudes.
Let's see how many I can get. Aaron Gordon was still on that team?
He was. Right? Kyle Lowry injured him, though, so he did not play in those playoffs.
Vooch was on that team?
Yes, he was.
Al-Farouq Aminu?
Al-Farouq Aminu he was on that team, but he was hurt, yes.
Okay. No Google himself, Evan Fournier?
Yep.
Was Terrence... I gotta imagine Terrence Ross.
T-Ross was on that team, yep.
Yeah, shout out. Yeah, that's as far as I can go.
Yeah. Like love those guys to death. They were not winning that series.
Okay.
But like, I think when you get into a playoff series, and I think this is every playoff series, you are forced to confront your weaknesses, and like every playoff series is an existential crisis. Like the joke, I think it was J.A. Skeets made this joke after all the game ones. Every playoff win feels like you're on top of the world, and every playoff loss feels like you're you're never going to win again. Like the emotions are crazy. And obviously it's been a while since Magic fans have dealt with these kinds of emotions, but the tenor of this podcast would have been very different on Wednesday than it is today. Yes. And this Wednesday might be very different than today. But I feel like every playoff series forces you to confront your weaknesses and ask a team, how are you going to overcome them? We look back at games 1 and 2 for the Magic, and, we could clearly see, okay, this team needs another creator. They need more consistent shooting. Their defense is great, but their offense can't do anything. Like, literally just couldn't do anything in those 2 games. And so the question for games 3 and 4 is they came back home, and you expected a stronger showing in game 3. Like, they obviously earned their place here. But the question was, okay, how do they respond to that? Like, how do they solve that problem? How do they will themselves back into the series, for lack of a better way to phrase it? And, Orlando, all those weaknesses are still present in Orlando, but they answered a lot of those questions. They came out and said, we're going to double down on our defense. We're going to double down on who we are, and we're going to hopefully ride some emotion and momentum from the crowd to a couple wins. Cleveland now, I think, is asking a lot of those same questions. They're 2 big lineup. It's the same way that last year's playoff series for Cleveland, and that was such a big talking point in the post-game pressers with the Cavs and the pre-game pressers with the Cavs after games 1 and 2 is like, how are these playoffs different from last year? They're asking a lot of the same existential questions again about, okay, does the Garland-Mitchell tandem work? What's going on with Darius Garland, to be perfectly honest, is one of my big questions. Can Evan Mobley and Jared Allen?
It's also one of my big questions. It's also one of my questions of like, what is going on there?
Yeah. And so, I think what this series has showed is when faced with kind of existential dread, when faced with the weaknesses that are inherent in your roster, the Magic are finding ways to still fight and get through them. And these last 2 games, Cleveland didn't even put up a fight. Once the Magic kind of tightened the screws and kind of put their vice grip on the game, Cleveland, like, I hate to be so blunt, but Cleveland folded. Like, I've experienced a lot of 30-point losses in the last decade. I would always tell people,
don't apologize, Philip, for telling the truth about the fact that they folded. They just did. They did.
Yeah, they folded. Like the point that I made is, like, if you look at game 2, the Magic played awful in game 2. They were terrible. The oxygen got sucked out of that room when Jalen Suggs got hurt, but they played awful in game 2. They still found a way to make that a 9-point game with about 4.5 minutes to play. Like, they were still kind of grinding and fighting, even though they did not have it. Cleveland, I've had a lot of 30-point losses in the last decade with this Magic team. Winning a 30-point game says a lot more about the team that's losing than it does the team that's winning. And the fact that the Cavs trailed by 30 in both of these games, I think, does say a lot about Cleveland and their willingness to fight and willingness to scrap that you have to have in the playoffs. It's easy to win when it's easy. It's a lot harder to win when it's hard.
Well, and particularly, Philip, and I want to ask you what just the environment was like in the arena for this, because I'm watching at home and I'm with my parents in my parents' house, watching with my uncle and my dad, and they're both like an abject just like apathy towards this team at this point. That third quarter in Game 4, Cavs are up at the half. You would have thought, okay, did well enough the first 2 quarters. You showed something that you weren't gonna like let that Game 3 define the rest of the series. And then the third quarter happened, and that is supposed to be where, like, you did the hard part in the first half. You did the hard part of bouncing back and showing something and showing up in the first place. And then the third quarter happens, and that tells me something. Like, I agree with you 100%. It says more when you are down by 30 than when you are up by 30, because any team can get hot going to run. But when you are down by 30, and particularly when you are up 7 at the half and have like
it's a 39 point, it's a 40-point turnaround.
Yeah. Like, so what was, when you're watching that in person and seeing the Cavs, how they're acting, how the crowds are acting to it, how Orlando did it, like, what stood out to you during that quarter, which to me, I think that's the defining quarter of the series so far.
Yeah, it absolutely is. I mean, it was just shocking because, like, you just don't expect that in a playoff series, like to be, for the game to flip on its head that much. And like, so much of it just felt like confidence. It just felt like an aggressive mindset. It felt like we know what we're doing and we know what we're doing works. I would say if you look at these 4 games, the only thing that's been consistent over the course of the 4 games has been the Magic's defense has been good. Like even when the Magic were losing those 2 games, like Cleveland Cleveland hasn't hit 100 in this series yet. First time I think that's happened since 2019, since the Raptors in 2019, where a team didn't score 100 points through the first 4 games of a series. The Magic, said at after the game on Saturday that we felt like we didn't need to change anything. We needed to tighten ourselves up. We weren't worried about necessarily what the Cavs were doing. We were turning the ball over, fouling a little bit too much, letting them get out in transition. If we cut those things off, then we're gonna come back in the game. So there's just this supreme confidence that it wasn't necessarily about what the Cavs were doing, although I'm sure they made some adjustments and some changes. It was all about what the Magic were doing. And like that tells you where the power in this series is. Even in games 1 and 2, it felt like if the Magic make shots, like this is a series, it tells you, I think, where the power is in this series. And that's, and Cleveland just couldn't figure it out. Like Donovan Mitchell dominated that first half. I am still trying to figure out how the Magic shut him down in the second half and how the Magic have shut him down in every second half this series. He dominated that first half and they took him away. Like plain and simple. They either he stopped taking the shots they needed to take. They, got over screens on him better. They defended Jared Allen better. They took away his outlets. The Cavs star didn't step up, and in this case, Franz Wagner scored 13 points, 12 points in the third quarter. He had 10 points in, I think, the first 5 minutes of that quarter. Their stars are stepping up and saying, we're going to take over this game. We're going to will this team to victory. And the Cavs star isn't.
It feels to me like there is some pie chart for Mitchell of the knee, checking out, and what the Magic are doing. There's a pie chart of those 3 things. I don't know what the breakdown is, but it's those 3 things. There's something this whole team doesn't feel really checked in. So it's not even just like a Mitchell like once out thing. It just feels like there's a chart. Those three things. I don't know what the breakdown is, but there's something there in those three. All right, after this, who should be the favorite? 3 games to go, 2 games in Cleveland theoretically, but who should be the favorite as we wrap this up? That's coming up as we wrap this up. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That is $150 win or lose. Bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks, all on an app that is safe, secure, and easy to use. Philip, Game 5. Cavs, when I looked before we were recording this on Sunday, so when people hear this, might have changed a little bit. But Cavs are 4.5-point favorites for Game 5. We made the same face. I was a little confused by that, a little tempted by that one. Minus 180 favorite in Game 5. Over-under is at 201, so still a pretty low.
That part sounds right.
That part, yeah. That feels right. I got 96, 95 or something in Game 5. Wouldn't be shocked. But what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet an automatic win. That is FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Philip, who should be favored? Who do you think is actually going to win this series now that we've seen 4 games? If you're going to wait for it, I can just tell you I think Orlando should be the favorite.
I think taking the 4 games in their totality, I think the Magic should be favored because if you've watched this series, like I said, it feels like everything is about the Magic. Like if the Magic make shots, they're going to win. It feels like it's that simple because we didn't even really talk about JB Bickerstaff here, but it felt like Cleveland's whole strategy is we're going to bet the Magic won't make shots. And that strategy worked in games 1 and 2. It didn't work in games 3 and 4. And it doesn't feel like, I was expecting game 4 there to be some grand adjustment. And they did a little bit like trying to catch Paolo on the blind side and try and speed him up a little bit more. But there wasn't some grand adjustment. The whole thing was just like play harder, and it was just like that's not gonna do it. And so, I would say
it's poking someone with the stick. Yeah, like playing harder. It's just like that meme where it's like I'm poking with a stick. Do something. Yeah, that's all it is.
And look, I thought Jamal Mosley got thoroughly outcoached in those first 2 games. Everything he has done in the last 2 games has worked and pushed all the buttons on Cleveland, to all the pressure points on Cleveland. Like it's been a complete 180 in the series. But the reason why I waffled is at the end of the day, the Magic still have to go win in Cleveland. And as raucous and loud as Kia Center was, Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse is just as tough an environment to play in. Orlando really struggled in those 2 games. Maybe they found their toughness and found their heart, and now they're used to and comfortable with playoff pressure, and they'll be better prepared for Game 5. But this is still the young, inexperienced team that has to figure out how to win a road playoff game. And I think now, best of 3 series. Look, Tuesday's going to decide the series. It's that if Orlando wins that, this might be done in 6. If Orlando loses that, then we're really going to learn a lot about this young team defending home floor for Game 6.
What really I think, Philip, in a very simple way makes me think Orlando is favored is I think to your point, everything has been about them, but they just feel like more present in this series. They just every game they have leveled up every game. I think every game has gotten better for them. The Cavs, they almost peaked in Game 1 to some degree. Like that was their best performance, and it's like you're going different directions. Obviously, the Cavs could look better at home. Both teams have played, I think, better when they've been at home. But it's just like the way that if these were like stocks, the Cavs started here, and they've done this, and the Magic has started here, and they've slowly gone up, and they're on these different paths, and it's it feels like Orlando has just moved away. We were talking before the show, what's your defining image of the series? I might even say this at the beginning, but you were talking about how it's Jalen Suggs is Darius Garland's trying to drive through it, gets chippy. He's trying to drive through him. It's playoff basketball. Suggs is just smiling, and he's embracing this. The whole Magic team feels like it has embraced this. I'm watching Max Strus, who's supposed to be this Heat culture product, and he looks bewildered. I'm looking at Donovan Mitchell, who's been in bigger playoff games than this, and it's not happening. One team looks like it's really excited by this, and one team does not, and that makes me think I'm picking the team that, like, all the tactical stuff we talked about, true, factual, valid. I'm picking the team that is more, like, bought into the moment than I am the team that is, like...
It still comes down to execution.
Coasting.
Like, it's...
Yeah.
Like
the Cavs just haven't had a good quarter. They've played 20...
Played two good first quarters.
They've had two good of the last 8 quarters. They've had 2 good quarters. They had 6 quarters in a row where they scored like 25 points or under. Like I don't know what we're doing here.
Yeah, and I think like I know this has been the big storyline with the Cavs because everyone's feeling it. The Cavs have a lot of pressure to win this series. Like I don't think Cleveland tanked their way to play Orlando on the last day of the season, but there's that perception that they willingly put themselves in the Boston bracket. They kind of did. I told people, like, look, I don't blame them. Why wouldn't you want to play the inexperienced Magic team that's never done this before?
I personally had a problem with, like, I think it's lame to do that.
Yes, I absolutely too.
If you were a normal basketball team, just win the game.
Yeah,
and play who's ever in front of you. That tells me something about you. Yeah.
This is my theory. If you're going to win a championship, and not everyone's going to, but you should always think you are. You got to beat everybody. You got to be able to beat everybody. You can't go. Just like if you go matchup hunting in a game, you stagnate your offense, which the Magic have done less of in games 3 and 4. If you go matchup hunting in the playoffs, you could get bit. You could get bit. And you just don't, especially that last day, you don't know what's going to happen. But now I'm trying to get back to the point that I'm trying to make. The pressure is all on Cleveland.
I'm hating so hard that it's distracting. I understand.
Yeah, no. It's all. I mean, but that's the point. Like, I've been telling people, like, for the Magic, this is their last year without expectation. Like, Orlando getting this to 6 games. We're going to sit back and say, yeah, we could have won that series, but the experience is going to be so good for this young team. They're going to get better. Now we know what this team needs. We know how close they are to getting to the second round, to being really competitive in the Eastern Conference. Next year, I talked to so many people who cover the Cavs recently, and everyone's like, yeah, the Magic are kind of where the Cavs were last year in a lot of ways. I think less pressure than that because they don't have Donovan Mitchell and the pressure of him leaving. The Magic are just getting ready to pay all their guys for the first time. But the Magic are kind of playing this year with no expectation, no pressure. Like, they're just going out there and playing, whereas Cleveland, like, you can feel in everything that they do, they know they have to win this series or everything's going to be chaos. JB Bickerstaff could get fired on the Monday after the series ends. Donovan Mitchell could force his way out in a trade. Like, everything is on the line for Cleveland. And, again, just like I said, like, just like we kind of pointed out, like, Orlando's smiling at the chaos around them, and Cleveland is trying to puff their chests and getting poked back in a lot of ways.
All right, so you picking Orlando to win?
I think so.
Yeah.
I've been after Game 3. I expected Orlando to win Game 3, and frankly win it handily, just because of the way the first 2 games went coming back home. I'm waiting for the close game. The one thing this series has lacked is a close game, and whoever wins that close game, and like, if you listen to me, like, I hate clutch stats. I hate, like, differentiating clutch from everything else. All 48 minutes matter. Mm-hmm. In the playoffs, that's different. You win or lose a series based on whether you can win a close game, and that close game is coming. We all thought it. Like, I was even talking to Magic staffers and Magic people, and they were like, "I think today's the close game. I think today's the game that and it looked like that for a little while." That close game is coming, and the question to me is, do you trust Donovan Mitchell to close that close game, or do you trust Paolo and Franz to close that close game? And we don't. And the Magic had a good record in clutch situations. It's a little deceptive because Orlando never really came from behind in any of those clutch games. That close, whatever that close game is, whether it's 5 or 6, that's going to decide the series.
Favor.
So it's a coin flip.
I think Orlando's doing it. The Cavs don't pass the vibe check. As dumb as that sounds, I tend to be I try to be very thoughtful and intent and pragmatic about these things. The Cavs just do not pass the playoff vibe check. They don't.
Yeah, and to your point, they've gotten it's like a season. You want to get better as the season goes on. They've gotten worse as the series has gone on, and we'll see what they look like back at home. Like everyone's different. Everyone like this series has been about home court at this point, and Orlando's still got to be the one to win in Cleveland.
If FanDuel had a prop, I would. They don't for this, and it's like kind of rude that I'm even going to say this. But if they had a prop to boo JB Bickert, like if there was a prop that the arena was going to boo JB Bickert's staff, it'd be like minus 10,000. It's going to happen.
Yeah.
It's going to be very awkward.
Yeah.
There. It's going to be a very awkward Game 5.
And if it's as awkward as you say it is, then yeah, I'm going to take the Magic to win Game 5 and finish the series in 6. But like look, the Magic were despondent Tuesday night. Like we were all questioning their identity. We were questioning the coach. We were things change very fast. And again, Orlando was an okay road team. I know they won at Cleveland, but without Mitchell right after the All-Star break, that game is, I throw that game out. Like it's meaningless, but the Magic have to prove they can win on the road still. And that's probably the toughest thing for a young team to do. And to now do it in probably the two most pressure packed road games you can have in a Game 5 and a Game 7. We're going to figure out just how mature and poised and grown up this young Magic team is.
And I think, honestly, it's telling that we're asking the same questions about the Cavs. We're going to find out how poised and grown up they are as well, which is indicting in its own different way. It's like exciting for one team, and it's indicting that you have to ask that question, I think, in some ways for the other team. But that's going to be it. This is our Locked On Cavs, Locked On Magic crossover to get you ready for Game 5 and the rest of the series. Philip, my man, it's a pleasure. Everyone else, talk to you soon. Subscribe, review both shows, please, and thank you. Enjoy the hoops if you're a Cavs fan. Just schedule some mental health time for yourself is what I would say.
The BetterHelp reads tomorrow, I think.
Yeah, BetterHelp promo code Locked On NBA is what I would say. Talk to you soon.
I want to thank Chris for coming on the show, for us sharing the show, I guess. And to break down the series, it's been great to chat with Chris throughout the course. I would strongly urge you to follow Locked On Cavs, get their perspective on things, see how they're feeling, a little bit of the panic from games 3 and 4. They've done a great job covering the Cavs all season long. So definitely keep up the great work with them and follow them the rest of this series. You can, of course, follow me on Twitter at PhilipRR_OMD. Subscribe to the podcast and Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, Himalaya, Google Play, Spotify, Odyssey, and all the fun with single podcasts to your podcast-enabled listening device. For the latest on the Orlando Magic, be sure to check out OrlandoMagicDaily.com. You can find us there on Twitter at OMagicDaily. You can also check out my Patreon page, the Orlando Magic Hub, for even more Orlando Magic content. Find that at patreon.com/Orlando Magic Hub. And as always, thank you for your support. By the time you're listening to this, I will have already landed in Cleveland, but I have to get out of here now in my present, your past, my future. I don't know. Time is kind of white, kind of Jeremy Bearimy here. But we will see you in Cleveland for Game 5 on Tuesday. We'll recap that episode on tomorrow's episode of Locked On Magic. But until then, for Orlando Magic Daily and Locked On Magic, this has been Philip Rossman-Reich. We'll see you all again for another episode of Locked On Magic.